Get the feedback off. And from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it to water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. The Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Less feedback. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts. The sermon title for today is God's Never-Ending Story. Has anyone ever seen the movie The Never-Ending Story? Okay. If you haven't, please view it. It is one of my most favorite movies in the entire world. I have had every client that I have ever worked with watch this movie, virtually every client. I also have had teenagers sitting in my living room coming back time and again to watch this movie. I can't even, I'm ashamed to tell you how many times I've seen it. Way too many. But not enough. Because it tells the story of Bastian. Now, Bastian is a young boy, I'd say maybe 9 or 10, and his mother has just died. So he's pretty sad. His father is incredibly critical of Bastian, and Bastian is kind of a timid little guy, and so his father's words cut him and hurt him. His father says to him at the breakfast tables, "Bastian, you've got to get your head out of the clouds," because he was talking about unicorns. And his father goes on to say, "And you wanted to ride horses, and you're too afraid to. What's the matter with you?" It's kind of a sad story, huh? Why am I telling it? What was the Old Testament reading? The call of a boy, the call of Jeremiah. We are invited into the never-ending story with Bastian. Because as Bastian goes to school, he gets bullied. And this is kind of a common occurrence. They try to steal his lunch money. He runs away, ends up getting thrown in a garbage bin. You know those big ones? This is where the poor kid ends up. Gets out, runs away again, and he hides in this bookstore. And there is this mean, crotchety, ornery old guy who is the bookstore seller. And he said, what are you doing in here? You know, we don't have any computers in here. We don't, and I'm going off script right now. We don't have any iPads. You can't play Angry Birds here. What's the matter with you? Why are you here? And he says, "But I love books." And he talks about Treasure Island and how he read it and how it inspired his imagination. And the bookseller says to him, "But then you became a little boy again once you finished reading it." And he says, but of course, it's just a story. And the bookseller has this book on his desk. And it intrigues Bastian. He says, well, what's that? He says, this book is not for you. Because you will not be a little boy again. Jeremiah was not a little boy again. This movie can be seen on so many levels, it's incredible. Well, we know that the bookseller gets distracted by a phone call, and we do know that Bastian takes the book, runs into school, is late for school, runs up into the attic. And what's great about the movie is that Bastian becomes part of the story. As Bastian is reading the story, he's reading about a land called Fantasia. And this land is being destroyed by the nothing. How many people think our land, our world, is being destroyed by nothing? And what does a nothing mean? It's an allegory all the way through. And so the empress, he finds out that the empress is very sick, and she needs a new name. And who is going to be the hero of the story? A fine warrior who's big and strong, and he's from the Order of the Buffalo, I don't remember at this point. But he's a fine warrior. And he comes to the palace where the empress lives. And they laugh at him because he's only a boy. They laugh at him because he's only a boy. I don't know about you, but I was thrilled when I turned 30. I was absolutely thrilled when I turned 30 because finally people would take me seriously. Don't see that happening here as much. But that was important to me. That was a watershed moment for me. This was a boy. And he had to leave all of his weapons and go out to find and name the empress. That was his quest. Well, of course, it gets very dramatic, and he goes through the swamps of sadness. And I don't know many who don't cry during this part of the movie. It's really sad. And guess what? Bastian is crying. Bastian is crying. When Atreyu stops to get hungry and eat a sandwich, Bastian gets his and starts eating. The juxtaposition of the stories are incredible. In the book, and actually I just bought this book for my grandson for his birthday, so hopefully he's not here or not listening to this. They actually make the real world, once they get into Fantasia, one color print, I think it's red or purple, and Fantasia as green. They're even two different colors. And you see the juxtaposition, so that when Atreyu is hungry, Bastian gets hungry. At one point, Atreyu gets scared by something. Bastian screams, and you can see them looking around, because they can hear him in the story. He's becoming part of the never-ending story. You are part of God's never-ending story. There's a point. It's also very Jungian, if anyone knows Carl Jung, that one of the tests that Atreyu has to go through in order to find out the empress's name is he has to go into a magic mirror gate. And what this magic mirror tells him is everything he does not want to know about himself. For within the brave person is the coward. And when he looks in that mirror, he sees Bastian. And guess who Bastian sees? Atreyu. Because in the coward is the man or the boy who can be brave, if called upon. Inside every one of you is the person who can be brave, is the person who can be prophetic, who's the person God can use in this world. We'll go to the end of the story. I'm not telling you what the nothing is. You have to get the movie to see it. You can get it from the library, so you don't even have to buy it. But you need to watch the movie. At the end of the movie, and I am going to tell you the end because I've seen it so many times, it doesn't matter whether you know the end. It's still as dramatic. Because what happens at the very end is Atreyu realizes his quest is to find a human child. And he doesn't know where to find a human child because the human child is the one who can name the empress. I get verklempt talking about it. And there is a point in this movie where Bastian has to get out of himself and name that empress. And they're pleading to him because all of Fantasia is being destroyed by this nothing. And there's only one kernel left when he finally yells out his mother's name. It is so powerful. Jeremiah says to God, I am only a boy, I cannot speak. Bastian says, I can't believe it. They can't be talking about me. But I can't, I have to keep my feet on the ground. All right, I'll save you. I will do what I dream. Dream big. God asks you to dream big. God asks you to grow into the person that God created in the first place before the world messed you up. Because we're all messed up on some level. You are being called just as Bastian was, just as Jeremiah was, just as Moses was. Moses, from what we understand, was a stutterer. He said, I can't speak, I'm not articulate. God used Moses anyway. God will use you, not in spite of who you are, and not in spite of your experiences, and not in spite of your history, not in spite of what ever happened to you as a child or didn't happen to you, not in spite of mental illness, not in spite of addiction history, but because of it. God uses who you are. God cherishes who you are. And God calls you, maybe not as a prophet, but to listen and to change the world and to beat back the nothing. To beat back the nothing that consumes hope, that consumes people, that helps us continue being victims. God calls us to use our experience, our lives, and kind of heal it. Heal it first. Do as well as you can to heal. And turn that to God, over to God. My abilities, my compassion, were based in a childhood that wasn't that great. That was the gift of that non-great childhood. There is gifts in everything. You've used them. I've seen you use them. You've used your histories to help other people. You've used what you've been given. But always ask God for more healing so that that flow can come through you even more. Being part of God's never-ending story is not for the faint-hearted. We have to understand and be willing to understand who we are in the world, what our place is, and are we in the right place? Or do we need to grow? When we authentically encounter the divine, we are transformed. And it may be just a seed in the ground that has been finally given water and soil, so that we don't know what the growth is. But we are transformed. You are called by God, despite all your fears, your character flaws, your histories that may have wounded you, and your feelings of unworthiness. That is historically consistent in the Bible. Those people who God calls feel, I can't do this. And God probably doesn't call those who say, me first, me first. I can do it for you. I can do it. Call me. There's an issue in that. There's an arrogance in that. God calls those who are humble. Think about Jesus' disciples cowering after he died in that upper room, in the room, cowering for fear for their lives. It's a tough road to travel. It's not for the faint-hearted. Where we are each simultaneously supremely unworthy and uniquely deserving. So pay attention. If God healed you in some miraculous way, as the woman was today, would you stand up and praise? Or would you hide it and maybe tell your friends? Would you share it with others? I bet God has healed everyone here. How much are you talking about it? Is it only to your closest friends? Can you share it with others? There's a wonderful inspirational poem by Ted Loder, a United Methodist minister. Empower me to be a bold participant rather than a saint in waiting, in the difficult ordinariness of now, to exercise the authority of honesty rather than to defer to power or to deceive to get it, to influence someone for justice rather than impress anyone for gain, and by grace to find treasures of joy, of friendship, of peace, hidden in the fields of the daily you give me to plow. Let us be authentically powerful, humbly praising God's generous spirit. Let us live with light shining down on us, within us, and illuminating the spirit of life in each of us and in each person we meet, because God is in them, whether you agree with them or not. Let us accept our good qualities, whether brilliance, talent, compassion, hospitality, to build up our community of faith, families, and friends. Let us give God the credit. Let us become beacons, bringing love and light to others and to the world. Let us smile at each other and see how the world changes. Let us pay it forward in response to God's grace, love, and compassion, and as part of God's never-ending story. May it be so.